computer audio. See, waiting room. 3 people. Admitting all. Admitting all. Admitting all. Admitting all. Yay, look at all the people joining. Cool. So we got lots of people joining the party. You guys are welcome to turn your microphones on since we're all going to be answering questions. So if you want to turn your microphones on, this is more about you than about me. Not to sound too much like some sort of visionary leader or whatever, but no, not at all. Yeah, so if you guys want to ask questions, the whole point of this is for people to ask questions, and if people got anything to contribute, they can contribute. So this is a community effort. We're all in this together. I don't know everything. I would like to think I do, but I don't. So if people have got things they want to contribute, they're more than welcome to add. Adding, messaging, admitting. Cool. So any questions for the evening, guys? Otherwise, we're all just going to kind of hang out here. I don't have any questions for you. Because I've been talking the whole week. So does people have anything to say or anything to ask? If you want to type, you're more than welcome to type. Elizabeth has joined the party as well, admitting everybody. Yeah, so just something that I'm going to throw out because I love contentious issues. So we are having an issue with a cat that moved into my father's house a couple of months back, and I'm sure you guys heard my lecture on birds and the big issue with cats being a massive problem. And this cat, as cute as he is, has killed probably a bird or a mammal every day, or a reptile every day for the last 4 months. I mean, I come around to my father's house probably 3 to 4 times a week because I've got things I'm doing around here. And I can say every single time I'm here, he's killed a new bird, mammal, or reptile, or whatever else I'm finding on the property. He's killed a couple of snakes, he's killed quite a few interesting birds, a couple of red-capped robin chats, a golden-tailed woodpecker, he's killed a whole bunch of bulbuls. Today I just caught, he just right now, about an hour ago, brought in a golden mole. So we're locking him inside tonight. And this is the challenge. Oh, there we go. So, as you can hear, he's meowing in the background. He was desperately trying to get out to get to that mole that we managed to confiscate from him. So it's always a challenge with animals, and we've taken the hard choice of handing him over to the SPCA because it was my father's cat to begin with. And we just can't stop this cat killing. He just will not stop killing. My father says that even when I'm not here, he's bringing stuff in every single night. So I really feel hard about them. And it's a hard choice, but obviously being conservationists, we have to make the hard choices in life, not the cute choices. And my father's just noticed in the last 4 months, there's just a complete absence of birds in the property. We used to be in a birding haven. We counted about 70 bird species on the property. Now there's a couple hardy-daws flying around, and that's it, nothing else. So yeah, if people want to contribute something, that's all I'm going to say on this evening's chat. I'm putting my glasses on. Does anyone have any questions about things we talked about? That's the whole reason we're here. Otherwise, we just. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes,
Hello, Nick. Okay, actually, it's my husband's computer. It's Susanne. Yesterday, you mentioned the foot of the bird, and I wanted to find out the ostrich. What foot? I mean, how does his foot? I mean, I know an ostrich, of course, but when you describe the constellation of the feet, how would it fit?
Well, he's got a very highly modified foot. He's got his main central toe, his rear toe. Now, usually with bird foots being theropods, they have 1 back, 3 forward. That's the most conventional type. The back toe has been absorbed up into the body just to reduce drag, because being a runner, he doesn't want to have the big floppy toe. And then what has happened is his middle toe, excuse my middle finger, so his middle toe is sticking out, and he's got his other toe over here, and he's got a little nodule of, so if you can imagine the 3 toes, he's got a little nodule what's remaining of the toe, but you can't even see it. Only with x-rays you can really see the remaining middle left toe. Imagine this is left foot. And then he's got the other toe over here, which is much smaller. So he's got 1 long toe and one little toe. And that's often what you'll see when you're tracking ostriches in the bush. It'll look like a big footprint and a little footprint right next to each other with a little knock on the front. So you only see two toes. So you see one long middle toe and then one side toe. And that's just basically a nice resting pad. Everything else has been, through selective evolution, lost simply because they are relying on speed for movement. And the smaller your surface area, the faster you move. So 3 toes drag you a little bit more than 2 toes. So individuals that have smaller toes gradually dominated the gene pool over time. So you'll only see 2 toes. But you can still see those little nodules through an X-ray or through an autopsy of an ostrich. You can still see them. But they're under the skin. Just like snakes actually still, in particular like in pythons, you still see vestigial back legs on pythons through an X-ray. And they've actually still got little claws around their cloaca. So pythons, being very primitive snakes, have still got their back legs. Why do some birds jump and others walk? It's selective behavior, often because the length of the legs. Running is often just energetic, and often you find with birds, simply because they're so lightweight, jumping actually uses less energy than actual moving each leg individually. It's a far less energetic muscular action. Being a heavy animal like the human will have a harder time jumping because you've got that much more to jump, but birds are very light. It also is this, sorry, this cat is going nuts, as you can hear me. Just give me a second. You are going out. No.
Norbert, how are you?
All right, there we go. Sorry, back. I had to lock him in the other room. So he's in a crazed mode tonight. He's trying to kill everything, and we're just trying to stop him. He's on this rampage at the moment because he gets all hysterical during the rain. We're taking him to the SPCA tomorrow, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm just reading through the questions. Sorry, who's speaking? Hi, you have a question? Anybody? No one's got questions.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Nick, you were talking yesterday about the extermination of birds in China. And
yes.
The reduction of the numbers there. How long ago was that?
1960s.
Were there any 1960s? And were there any migratory birds that came from that part of the world to this part?
Yeah. So in China, obviously the steppe eagles and the steppe buzzards. A couple of the stork species also came from China, and we noticed those losses in South Africa because they weren't coming through. But India and those other areas supply a large number. But the steppe eagles, because they were in northern China, didn't really hit our population. They weren't too badly hit. It was mostly the southern Chinese population, which are native bird species to the area, and they don't really leave because it's a more tropical area. So there's not too many migrants, but the native birds were completely extirpated over there. Even in China today, I used to guide groups to the Daqingshan Mountains in northern China. I saw the occasional partridge, and that was pretty much what I saw. So yeah, it was in the 1960s, it went on to the 1970s, and the locust explosion was catastrophic because of it. It's a huge conservation issue in China. They won't admit it to this day, but it's a well-studied, if you actually go read up about it, it's a well-studied phenomenon that happened in China, even though they've all tried to intellectualize it, because no one wants to be, quite frank, no one really wants to piss off China these days. Shane, regarding the cat's collar, snakes don't hear, so putting a bell doesn't help. Moles, of course, also don't hear very well. Well, they do, but they also can't run away from a cat, and tonight was a golden mole. Birds like barbets and bulbuls, they're quite intelligent, and they still don't seem to get hammered. As I said, it's literally every night that we've lost a bird or a rodent or a lizard or something. Birds are highly intelligent, Eunice. Flying birds are far more intelligent than ground-based birds. It's because flying involves a series of thought processes, ongoing intelligent thought processes. You are judging distances, you're analyzing information, you're accounting for concepts, you are solving problems that are occurring, and you have to be fairly smart. You're like an on-flight computer. There's always something going around. So terrestrial birds, like any of your chickens, are not nearly as smart. But anything that flies, especially birds of prey, highly, highly intelligent. Not bird related. I've got too many questions. So let me just scroll back. Birds, intelligent animals, elephants, dassies, and dugongs. Okay, so we're going to actually, I'm doing the presentation on that on Tuesday next week, specifically on the different types of animals. I'll come to that question at the end of this lesson, Margaret, if you've got time, just remind me again. Okay, with regards to the color of the birds, it was refreshing to hear things. Lilac-breasted rollers got 36 colors. Okay. So, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. There's lots of statements coming through here. Just save it to questions rather than statements because I can't read all of them. Any other questions, guys?
Yes, Nick.
Yes.
I just want to know, in relation with humans.
Yes.
I believe I've done some studies where they said the pyramid of all living creature or of the universe or whatever that had been created, humans are like on top of the pyramid.
Yeah, see, that's a man-made. Sorry, you carry on?
Yes, I just wanted to understand why they're saying humans on top.
That's
Is it
purely
because we are more
human-centric.
intelligent than
That's what we
animals?
call anthropocentric, because I'm a Darwinist, I don't believe in anything except for the fact that humans are just another animal on this planet. We're pretty smart by our standards, but we're pretty dumb by other standards. So we are not on top of any pyramid beyond the pyramid that we deem ourselves on top of. We've decided we're on top of the pyramid. Right now, we're not. I mean, right now we are, but in 10,000 years, will we be on top of the pyramid? 500,000 years ago, we weren't on top of the pyramid. So that pyramid of life is a very archaic, very anthropocentric mindset that deems that we're important. And for the longest time, we thought that mammals were at the top and insects were at the bottom, but actually insects are more important than humans. If we went extinct tomorrow, the planet would be fine. If insects went extinct tomorrow, the planet would be doomed in terms of everything, all other life. All plants would suffer, all other birds would suffer, all mammals would suffer. So arguably, you could say insects are at the top of the pyramid if you're talking about importance. Just mindsets of pyramids, that's a very human-made concept. Even the taxonomy that we did last week, that's a human concept for explaining evolution. Families and classes and orders, those are all man-made concepts in order to make sense of relationships. But I mean, everything is just this branching out. They just branch out in all directions, and as you go further along the branches, things get more and more related. But there's no set pyramid beyond what we deem as a pyramid. I made the rules. I say I'm the top. But if you die tomorrow, are you still at the top of the pyramid? If that makes sense. When do birds usually migrate from Europe to Africa? We don't have many migrants out of Africa. We have lots of migrants into Africa. So we have a lot of migrants coming from the European winters into our summers, but not many the other way around, if that answers Joseph. So most of the migrants are coming from, because the Northern Hemisphere is predominantly land-based, so they are subject to much colder winters than the Southern Hemisphere. The Southern Hemisphere is predominantly ocean-based, so our winters tend to be much warmer. So even our winters are usually not that bad, no matter where you are in the Southern Hemisphere, because the majority of the Southern Hemisphere is an ocean. I'll answer you in a second, Andre, about Darwinism. So the Southern Hemisphere, you think about Australia, Africa, South America, generally pretty warm for the most part. So there's no real pressure for our birds to migrate. In the Northern Hemisphere, being landlocked, not landlocked, but mostly land-based, the winters there are far colder. So most of the birds migrate out of the north into the south, but not many species migrate out of the south into the north. So it's just generally in Northern Hemisphere winters, you get migrants. Darwinism, bird-related, Andre Gildenhuys, question.
I thank you so much for that. Excuse me. I'm so glad you brought up the point that you are a Darwinist, because it relates perfectly to my question. I had this debate with a friend of mine, a colleague who I think is quite knowledgeable. And I want to bring this back to hybrid versus Darwinist evolution. Because I attended a basic bird course a few years ago, and I couldn't find it in my bird book now, but we spoke about a particular hybrid duck. I think it's mixed with a yellow-billed or something. You probably know the reference.
Yeah, the mallard
But
and
we
the
were
yellow
told,
bill.
yeah, that's the one. We should shoot it if we see it. But is that not a form of evolution, and
Well,
evolution leading back to Darwinism?
yeah, well, see, now here's the contentious thing, is because everything, even what we're doing, is natural. Because if human beings are a living creature, which we are, everything we're doing on the planet is no different to what everything else does. The only thing is that we're cognizant of it. The problem with hybrids is that, especially something that wouldn't occur naturally, we are applying conservation as what would happen if we weren't putting our fingers into it. So mallards and yellow-billed ducks would not hybridize if we weren't around introducing the two species. So we are trying to minimize our impact because we've introduced those two species. So it's a type of, I love the word biological pollution. Cats are a biological pollutant because we introduce something that's damaging ecosystems. When we introduce a disease into an area, it's a biological pollutant. It would have never happened if it wasn't for us. Even though we're animals, it's still something that we did, and we are cognizant of our damage. So it is, by our definition of pollution, something that we've done that damages the ecosystem. If we weren't cognizant of our impact, we would not be aware that we were doing damage. Like our cat over here doesn't know that he's doing damage. He's just killing something every single night because that's his nature. He doesn't have the ability to intellectualize it. We do, if that answers your question.
Perfect, thanks. And because there's no other questions, now please go into a second question.
Sure.
You spoke about the birds and magnetism, how the birds read about magnets in their head, they read the magnetism of the earth. Now, on the same particular introduction course, we were told about birds in the Kalahari Transfrontier Park between Northern Cape and Botswana, I presume?
Yeah.
But how there wasn't rain there for 10 years, and it rained, and basically 2 days later, birds from Cape Town were there.
Yeah.
Or something to
Now,
that effect.
You see, there's just specifically one kind of migration that I picked up upon. There are other kinds as well. There's seasonal impacts. There's they pick up on all sorts of things. And I just went through the one concept, but there's lots of other types. A lot of them also follow seasonal patterns in ways that we can't pick up. I mean, if any of you guys have got injuries, for example, I've got multiple injuries, and my knee starts to hurt like hell whenever it starts to rain. My body just knows it's going to rain. So, and obviously animals, a lot of us also, dogs get a bit funny just before it starts to rain, and animals have these cues, these instincts that we probably have as well, but we don't know them just as well because we are less in tune with our environments these days. But for instance, I knew today it was going to rain a good 3 hours before it rained, simply because my knee was hurting like hell. And a lot of animals will have these cues as well. They are able to pick up that it's going to rain before it rains and then move with it. And I'm not sure how they do that because, again, I haven't done that much in terms of the biological sciences regarding ornithology, but I do know animals are able to pick up before earthquakes. They're able to pick up, changes in weather before it happens, and so on and so forth. So these are just cues, things that happen that they are able to pick up on because they have evolved over time to benefit themselves. Those that couldn't do it died out, and those that could do it spread their genes through the gene pool. And then eventually it became normal in the gene pool. Any other questions?
Nick,
Sorry.
Kevin here. I'm in Cape Town, and very often we get asked about the ostriches and the penguins. So when and why did the ostrich become flightless? And secondly, the penguins, why have they migrated so far north away from the ice?
They didn't. Here's the kicker. So if you go back to Gondwana land several hundred million years ago, or not about 100 million years ago, Africa, South America, Australia, and Antarctica were all connected to each other. Sorry, let me just go back. Naughty boy, come.
Okay.
He's going absolutely nuts. I didn't grab him, he was fighting me to get out. So those continents broke apart. I apologize about the cat. He's going hysterical because he wants to kill that bowl. Those continents broke apart, and ancestral populations of penguins were on those continents as they broke apart. As the continents drifted apart over the last couple dozen million years, those populations have individually continued to evolve. Those penguins are not able to interbreed anymore because they're completely different species. But if you went back over time, when those continents, Antarctica, Australia, South America, and Africa, were all connected, if you all look at the same point, they literally fit together like a puzzle piece. You can take all those continents and put them together quite nicely. And that's where those original population were. So they were literally, just all hanging out in the same spot. And only because the continents have broken apart, so they haven't gone anywhere. They've just been hanging out on their coastlines. And then over time, as Africa drifts further north, or as Antarctica drifts further away, you'll get penguins in other parts of the world, but there were no penguins anywhere else except for those areas. That's why they're all only in the southern hemisphere, none in the northern hemisphere, because there was no ancestral population of penguins in the northern hemisphere. It's much like the same with ostriches. That's why you get ostriches, moas, emus, cassowaries, the elephant bird, which is now extinct from Madagascar. They all existed on the same landmass. And as those continents broke apart, they've evolved in their different directions. Certain species like the moa and the elephant bird have gone extinct, but nevertheless, they were around until very recently.
Okay, sorry, and then the ostrich, and when did he become flightless? And
No, they were always flightless. We found fossils or ostrich form type birds dating back 90 million years ago. So when the dinosaurs were around. So they're the most primitive of birds, actually, modern birds. They are more closely related. If you want to talk about closely related to a Tyrannosaurus rex, the ostrich is probably the most closely related to the Tyrannosaurus rex. Other birds are much more advanced by comparison. They are very primitive birds. So we found ostrich form birds dating back 80 to 90 million years ago. So 30 million years before the dinosaurs went extinct. So they never went flightless, they've always been flightless. Because remember the first presentation, the theropods, the definition of a theropod was a two-legged dinosaur reptile that had modified frontal limbs. And only over time, the frontal limbs have been able to fly, not the other way around. Penguins, by contrast, the other way around, they've lost the ability to fly because of their swimming. But basically, they fly through water, if you want to think of it that way. So they swim, which is flying. When did the ostrich come to South Africa? They've always been here. Again, the continents broke apart, and those ancestral populations have been there for 90 million years. Alexander Schubert, that answers your question. So,
yeah,
again,
Nick.
Yes.
Nick, there's two things I want to mention, but first of all, it's not a question. I just want to know, maybe from your side, how didn't you take the incident of your cat as maybe a way of controlling the number of certain species? Is maybe playing that role?
Oh, he doesn't. Cats, as in domestic cats, are not natural. We selectively bred them over the last 9,000 years to have an enhanced killer instinct. If you look, this is not about mammals as a lesson, but if you look at the way cats behave in the wild and how a domestic cat behaves, they're very different creatures. The African wild cat does not behave the same way as the domestic cat. So he doesn't control numbers. He just kills and kills and kills, because when we first domesticated cats in China and throughout Central Asia 9,000 years ago, they were bred specifically to protect granaries from rodents. So cats that had an enhanced killer instinct were kept, and over generations, over hundreds of years, they selectively bred cats to be more and more aggressive. Much like with dogs, Jack Russells, for particular, were bred specifically to be ratters. We wanted dogs that were obsessed with killing, so they would kill rodents in our granaries and protect our crops. And cats are the same, so they don't behave in a normal context. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, the second one is about the birds. Yeah, the bird lesson, like you've done it. You didn't mention anything about the sounds,
Yeah, sounds, that's a
because
whole
you
other
know, but
lecture. There's a lot to cover in terms of sounds. I mean, that is, it's a week of studies. And I am doing a bird part 3 in future. This was a basic introduction just into birds. So if you want to hold on for sounds and other forms of behavior, antagonistic behavior, mating, we are doing a bird part 3, but I was planning to get through some other more in-demand subjects. I've had a lot of demands for mammals, elephants in particular. So I was hoping to get through that first before I start going into advanced concepts, like how birds vocalize, because there's a lot of stuff. I mean, actually showing birds, for example, have got multiple voice boxes. We've got one, and they've got multiple, and they're basically played like a pan flute. Very primitive, or very, very, very simplistic description of it, but that's
okay.
why their voices are able to do things we can't do.
Okay, maybe you will mention that when we'll come to that.
Yeah.
Are there some birds that do not make sounds? Because I never heard an ostrich making a sound.
Ostriches do
I'm
them.
hearing Otteron.
If you get
I'm hearing Otteron. I only hear the female making a sound like a hissing, but the male is the one. Yeah, the male is the one making a big sound like a lion from far. But from the female, it's like she never make a sound.
There's again, we don't know, and this is the reason why people often, a lot of the nonsense with Jurassic Park, we just assume that dinosaurs made sounds. We don't actually know. The problem is, well, ostriches, as far as I know, all birds make sounds to greater or less extents.
Okay.
The songbirds are more advanced, but ostriches do make this woo woo sound when you actually listen to them, but it's quite soft and it's actually very difficult. A lot of the birds that communicate more vocally, ostriches being plains animals, they're typically out in the bush, out in the open, and they're more visual than anything else. So they don't tend to have these long vocalization calls to advertise territories in the same way other birds do. Birds that live in thickets and bushes obviously need to be very vocal in order to explain that I am here. I'm in the spot. Don't come into my bush because I'm going to come and knock you out. But if you're in the ostrich waving your feathers around and saying, look at me, I'm a badass, you don't really need to make a sound because everything can see you 20 kilometers away, So it's just basically, they don't need to waste their time. There's no selective pressure for them to be vocal. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to tackle my question later in your lectures, but I've got a silly thing that has been boggling my mind for some time. If you look at a wagtail, whether he's walking or standing still, why does he wag his little tail up and down? I can't figure it out.
Again, a lot of stuff with wagging. See, there's many things. I've heard scientists say it's a balance factor, but that's nonsense. A lot of pipits, which they are related to pipits, they don't wag their tail. A lot of them, sometimes we get something which we'll cover specifically in talks about evolution. We call it genetic drift. And it's behavior or appearance that in no way affects the behavior of the survival of the animal. It just gets carried along with the rest of the genes. Like say, for instance, if you've got a tendency for tapping your fingers and you tend to be very, very, very powerful, very dominant in your gene pool, and that tapping your fingers has no effect on your survival. It's just something you like to do. And everything else you're doing is actually making you win the race. Over time, all your children, all your progeny, and your grandchildren and your grandchildren's grandchildren will have a genetic predilection for tapping their fingers, even though it doesn't really affect their survival. And it's just something that's carried through with the genes. It's called genetic drift. And that's a gene or either an appearance or a behavior that in no way harms the survival of the animal, but it's piggybacked on genes that did benefit the survival of the animal. And that could be the case with the wagtail. It just wags its tail because ancestral populations of wagtails wag their tail, and because they were great at surviving, they just passed those genes on. And wagtails wag their tail now. This is something that they do. It could also be, and as far as I know, the females wag their tails as well. So it's not just a male display thing like with penguins, peacocks. So it doesn't seem to be anything that is in any way detrimental to their survival or beneficial to their survival. It's not a mating. It's not a mating call. I've heard other guys say that tapping on the ground with their tail summons females, but you cannot hear a feather tapping on the ground more than a meter away. And that's absolute nonsense. So it could just be a case of genetic drift, if you know what I mean.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Nick, a question on bird feathers and the colors.
Yes.
My understanding is some of the colors of the bird feathers purely how the sun reflects on the feather. Is that correct?
Yeah. So they actually have these very, very basic definition crystals in the feathers. They don't have pigments. They do, but they're very rudimentary. Very few birds have pigments. Pigments are expensive to produce. So they cheat by having these crystalline substances in the feathers that are attuned or grown in a certain way. They refract certain colors of the light spectrum. That's why birds' feathers shimmer rather than a solid color. There are exceptions, like the Turako. He has red pigment in his feathers and green pigment. Certain parrots also have green pigment, but red is very difficult to produce in nature. It's a very costly substance to produce. So why produce something that's expensive biologically when you can cheat and develop a crystal which just reflects red light? So they have these crystalline substances, very, very simplified explanation, but that's essentially what it is. These crystalline substances in the feathers that on a microscopic scale reflect red light or blue light or green light or whatever they're reflecting. And that's why birds shimmer rather than be a solid set color like a red piece of paper. But if you look at a Turako's feathers, they don't shimmer, they're just red, like a red t-shirt.
And is that why, for example, if you see a sunbird, for example, sometimes they look black, almost black?
Yeah, because the light's not hitting them at the right angle for them to refract that light.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's simply, if you ever have a prism, I'm sure you've done high school science, and you shine a light prism through it and you get different spectrums, and it's the same thing with this. So those crystalline substances are only refracting certain layers or certain aspects of the light prism, so they are refracting at certain angles. And there's a whole level of science that ornithologists can go into. I've read about it, but again, I'm not a professional ornithologist. I don't even remember the technical term for it. I just know it is a crystalline substance in the feathers that reflect light. It's cheating as opposed to making pigment, because pigment's expensive. Even butterflies do it as well. That's why butterflies a lot of the time have that slight shimmer, and depending on the angle, it can be blue or black or purple, you know? So sunbirds are very, very, very iridescent crystals. That's what iridescent crystalline substances. That's what they're called. I just remember the word now. Cool. Does that help? Again, lesson 3. I'm going to do some preparation in advance. Specifically, I'll do some diagrams of how it does it. I've got books on the material, and I will make sure that I've got a proper explanation for you. But it is not color based. It's light reflection. Any other questions?
I'm me again, Nico Andre here. On 2 occasions, I and my partner, we had stone pigeons make nests on a balcony. I didn't mind, but my partner was concerned. Is there a problem of them bringing germ into our home if they make a nest on a balcony?
You got more. You get bird lice and mammal lice, and bird lice can almost never go into humans. I mean, there have been cases, but that's highly unlikely. And diseases, yeah, in the feces, sure, some diseases can breed that can be harmful to human beings, but generally, most of the diseases they carry we're not often able to carry. We usually need something, jumping straight from bird to human is quite hard in terms of diseases. I mean, I'm sure you've had times where I've had a pet budgie and he crawled in my mouth once when I was a kid and I didn't get sick. So if a budgie can crawl into your mouth, you're not going to get sick. So, but again, I think it's fine. I mean, we've all got birds nesting in our ceilings. I know that I've got a pair of Indian miners nesting in my property. They don't seem to make me sick. I wouldn't worry about it unless it's getting to the point where it's literally you're inundated with bird feces and you just really can't do anything about it. But let them be there. I mean, they're not harming anybody. If anything, they'll attract a couple raptors to take them out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Pigeons, bring the fat lice, yeah. But again, a lot of those, Carol van der Kuyf, a lot of those lice we are not actually able to get. They don't prefer being on humans. They're specifically adapted to clinging onto bird feathers, so they don't dig on us. They're not really interested. They might try our luck and we might be itchy for a few days, but usually they just don't survive. They're not attuned to living on hair. They are attuned to living on feathers. And also they don't like our blood. They don't like a lot of that sort of things. Sorry, there's a question here. Toucans versus hornbills, convergent evolution. Here we go. Hummingbirds and sunbirds, and also sugarbirds. Hummingbirds, sugarbirds, and sunbirds, convergent evolution, 100% true. From Joe Chen. Okay, I thought that was a question. Why do birds? Some birds walk and some birds jump. Jumping can often be, as I said earlier, it can be more energy efficient than walking. And if you're not a stalking bird, like a bird that's specifically trying to grab larger animals, jumping can be far more energy efficient. And when you're eating smaller objects, it can just be beneficial, far more effective. So something like a babbler, which jumps around quite aggressively, he's got short legs. He uses less energy by jumping around because he's so light. And also having short legs require less energy to develop than having long legs. And he's hunting small objects, so he doesn't need to have these long stalker legs. Something like an egret, he has to have long legs because he's specifically attuned to hunting bigger, larger fish and that sort of thing. One question. Sorry, my question. Okay, spread of multiple things. Okay. So can birds like swifts, when migrating, sleep and flying? That depends on your term of sleeping. I've heard that they can sleep, but whether it's the same as our sleeping is very different. From what I understand is they actually turn off certain parts of their brain. It actually is shown that with soldiers, they can do this as well. Certain soldiers can actually sleep while they march. They've trained their bodies to just do something automatically. So it's not true sleep, but you're resting certain parts of your brain and letting other parts of your brain work. I'm sure any guy who's done any sort of bushwalks or military experience will know all about sleeping while you're doing something. You just kind of do it as an automaton, you zone out. So it's not deep REM sleep. In Cape Town, we have more white-breasted crows. You mean the pie crows going crazy? Okay, the change in normal territory, sometimes it can just be an ecological collapse, like something that's controlling the crow populations has disappeared. Maybe there was a raptor in the area that was controlling them, and that one raptor was taken out, and all of a sudden the population explodes. Crows are very successful by nature, and just removing a predator out of the area will cause their number to explode, just like humans. You know, in the past, we just barely survived, but when we killed a couple of predators off, we just exploded and we took over the planet. So it could be anything like that. It could also be a disease wiped out another population of birds, and because that absence of birds in the area, crows suddenly just took up the vacuum. So there are multiple reasons why crows will just suddenly take over. It could be various things. All of a sudden, maybe that there was a new breeding habitat or a new food source. A factory opened up in the area providing new food. So I can't tell you why crows specifically in that context. They'd have to do a scientific study to actually say why do crows suddenly explode in the Cape. Any other questions?
Yes, Nick. I don't know if you would mention that. I just want to know, in terms of the number, the population of birds and bird species, which one outnumber the rest of them in the world?
I can't tell you worldwide, but in Africa, it's the red-billed quillia by far. They number in the tens of billions. I mean, clouds of them. So the red-billed quillia is by far the most populated populace. There's a question there. So from Joe Chen. So yeah, the red-billed quillia is by far the most populated bird in South Africa, and in Africa, not just South Africa.
Beautiful.
So yeah, they're just a fantastic bird, and they're very successful. And obviously, with a lot of the time, their predators haven't been taken out across Africa. Their numbers have grown exponentially as well. So they. Okay, true. Yes, the African shotgunner female lays her eggs and the males take care of them. That is true. Red-billed quillia. I'll write it there. Excuse my spelling, but it's Quelea. Quillia, like that. Guys, we're running out of time. If you want to join the WhatsApp group, you can WhatsApp me and we can discuss this in the group because there's obviously a lot of questions. We're starting with mammals next week, Tuesday. Firstly, the evolution of mammals and then modern mammal species. Mammals are really interesting, a lot more interesting than you realize, and a bit of an oddity, even though we are quite successful. Hope you guys enjoyed our little chat. 40 minutes is never enough. Yeah, and if you haven't confirmed, please confirm with me that you're on the emailing list, and I'll make sure that you stay on the group. Otherwise, we're going to just change the password. All passwords going forward are going to be the same from now on, because apparently there's confusion with the different groups. I changed the password for every group to stop hackers getting in, but I'm just going to keep the password the same for every single group in future to stop confusion. So it will be, I will email it at the beginning of the week, and it will be the same for all groups going forward. All right, and that's simple as that. So guys, thank you for popping by. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, please ask. I look forward to hearing from you.